International Air Reserve, I'm sorry, I have a little trouble reading your handwriting now. Response. Yeah, response. Business owner, enlisted member of the United States Air Force, officer in the U.S. Air Force, Arizona Air National Guard, and he's currently a pilot. Vernon Parker, former mayor of Paradise Valley, Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of Agriculture for President George W. Bush, former General Counsel for the Office of Personnel Management, Special Assistant to President George W. Bush, and has been endorsed by Representative Trent Franks, apparently. So, Wendy Rogers is owner of a home inspection business called Housemaster Home and Termite Master. Housemaster Home and Maricopa Termite Inspection. United States Air Force retired lieutenant colonel, a academically trained clinical social worker, and she happened to have been one of the very first women in the U.S. Air Force. I'm sorry. Did I say women? I'm sorry, not one of the very first women. There were lots of other women. One of the very first pilots in the U.S. Air Force. Leah Campos Schaumbauer is Operation Officers with the National Clandestine Service.
My own experience was to earn a Pell Grant and academic scholarships to get to college. I took care of myself after I was able to get that help because hard work and perseverance opened the doors of opportunity for me. But what I learned was that the most important thing that a family can have is a job. And what we need to do are create pathways for people to have access to jobs. Jobs creates independence for a family, self-respect, and allows people to take care of their kids and prepare for the future. So I think there's a few things that Congress can do to get our economy back on track and help people get access to jobs. And number one, we should be helping small businesses get started and grow. In Arizona, 90% of our economic engine comes from small.
Congress, how would your tenure in Congress work toward first helping with the recovery of the U.S. economy, and then, of course, advancing it? How will that impact Arizona? And then as a third, but perhaps equally important consideration given Arizona's demographic makeup, how will the presence of the Hispanic population and the growth in the Hispanic market feed into that, play into your vision for how the U.S. economy should be recovered?
Well, thank you, James. I want to first just start by giving my thanks to Rio Salado College and the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for hosting the debate this evening. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. James, I did understand that because folks are missing the Olympics, there's going to be a gymnastics competition at the end?
It will be during the intermission.
During the intermission, okay. Well,
and I will
be thinking about our routine. So, in all seriousness, I'm grateful for everyone who's taken the time out of their very busy lives to be here with us this evening, and I'm grateful for the opportunity for us to discuss what I think is the most important issue facing Congressional District 9 and, frankly, the state of Arizona, which is our economy. I'm running for Congress because I believe that this Congress just doesn't get it. They're not serving we the people. And all around the state of Arizona, families are struggling to make it, and Congress isn't doing anything to help them. And I believe if we're going to change Congress, we have to change the people that we see.
All right. Great. So what we are going to do is, again, start with the big picture question that each candidate will have. We have an intellectual question. I love intellectual questions. They all are, of course. If a voter gives it to us, it must be true. Paul Krugman recently published a book, End This Depression Now, in which he makes the strong case for a government spending program that can return the United States to full employment within 2 years. Have you read the book? That's a pointed question. And do you agree with such a program, and how will you how will you promote it in Washington? So it's specifically about the book. If you haven't read the book and you'd like to comment more generally on how to end this depression now or in 2 years, please feel free to do that. Let's start, if you don't mind, with Mr. Cinema.
The kind of research and development and new thinking that's going to drive the economies of the future. We here in CD9 and in Arizona generally have a special opportunity when it comes to solar, the chance to make Arizona the solar state. But most importantly, we need to be helping entrepreneurs and those people who are starting new businesses.
Recognize today's actually a very important day in the context of the Affordable Care Act. Today, for the first time in our country's history, women have access to free preventive care. So women who need an annual exam or who need to get a breast screening can do so for the first time, even if they don't have the ability to pay for it. And that's important because that saves a lot of money not just for those women and their families, but for all of us throughout the country. The Affordable Care Act is by no means perfect, but I do think it was an important start to addressing the issue of health care, which is broken in this country. For instance, today, because of the Affordable Care Act, children who have autism or Down syndrome can no longer be denied health care coverage on their parents' plans because of their disability or their disease. Women who are diagnosed with breast cancer can no longer receive a letter from their health insurance company saying, oops, never mind, we're not going to cover you anymore because you're sick. The list goes on of the benefits that have now accrued to Americans, very real benefits that people benefit from every single day. There are some real problems with the legislation, and I think that the next Congress, regardless of its political makeup, will have to address these issues. And some of the concerns that I have are, number one, I believe that the law does not yet do enough to bend down the cost curve, particularly for small and mid-sized businesses. I cannot believe this time is already out.
Thank you.
And talking about the economic and business and jobs effects of what happens with healthcare, we are seeing families, small businesses, large businesses, and the federal government buckling under the weight of escalating healthcare costs. We have to stop that explosion of costs, or else it is going to be driving our economy into the hole, as it has in part over the past decade, driving down our competitiveness globally, as we've seen with, for instance, our car companies compared to companies around the world, and making it almost impossible for small businesses to continue to grow and thrive, and for families out there to be faced with the real kinds of life and death decisions that they have to be making. So we need a healthcare system, and I think what passed with the Affordable Care Act was a good first step, but that really one that does continue to push forward on bending down that cost curve. There's a few things we need to do differently. Number one, if we're going to